All right. Very briefly, Alfredo, Elena, getting back to the ground and the soil. I think it's kind of worked out quite nicely. Ending yesterday with the Says course and Convoy's Wharf and soil and ground, and coming back, getting the wisdom of Elena and Alfredo. So it's over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Ed, and everyone that organized this workshop. I'm here basically to present Elena, because she will be basically the one that will be describing, explaining some of part of the work that we do in landscape urbanism at the Architectural Association. That is the work that we do involves a lot of work with soil, as you will see, which is part of the overall, let's say, agenda of the program. We have an agenda where there is a sort of interest on how policies in general transform landscapes. No? There's an agenda that talks about or try to understand how the policies are a driving force and how to shape literally the way in which we live, the landscapes we live, whether urban or rural. And there's also an intention in the program to make the designers aware, no, of those policies, and that perhaps there's a role that designers could play by designing policies and not just following the policies that exist, no, as regulation, planning, etc., which is a wider agenda. But also, as part of the program, it's important for us to understand not just what this might be called top-down approaches, but also bottom-up ones, which I think is what we're looking more into this workshop, and that's where the soil comes in. And there's always, you know, at least in our approach, conversation, no, between top-down decisions, bottom-up kind of push movements, ideas, etc., which are more reflected as well in the way in which soil is impacted by the way you know, human activities happens onto literally the ground, no? And that's where we start, at least in the program, become very, very interested into understand the processes, no, behind the soil, and that's where Elena comes in. No, she studied landscape urbanism at the IEA. She's an earth scientist, and now it's part of the program staff. And I mean, you have heard this morning conversation with the other guys of the workshop, and now she will be presenting that part of the workshop. Yeah, thank you very much, Elena, and I leave you to present.
So this is a very long title, Soil as Palimpsest. Palimpsest is a key concept because we will go through it very closely. And it's called images, process of care, labor, and interconnectedness that are three of the keywords that have been roaming around from the beginning of yesterday until today. So we will navigate on what I call the soil palimpsest, what some soil scientists call the soil palimpsest, and how this vision has been instrumentalized to construct some imaginaries that we work around at the NU. Yes, so this is me, and this is how deep I've gone to the soil. This is the type of materials I work with, and so I come, like, my background, of course, is the earth sciences, but within that there's a vision within soil history and paleosoils in particular that study soil as these artifacts that hold history of the past. Most of these works have done around archaeology, because the soils that are held in between pyramids, relics in general, they hold history about what were the environments that were surrounding this type of landscapes. So the thing of the soil palimpsest is that the processes that are embedded in the past are interacting with the landscapes and the conditions of today. So, for example, here we're getting some soil from. So this is this is floor from biggest pyramid in Mexico City, that is the Aztec temple. But today it's interacting with the current flooding. So you see the soil is kind of damp. So this moist of it, it's creating features in the soil of today, but it's interacting with everything that happened in pre-colonial times when this was a proper lake. So this mentality on soil as a palimpsest is how can this concept of understanding this tracing into soil can make us can bring a different lens to what we compose in landscape, urbanism, and this imaginaries. So in this, from this school of thought of the paleosoils, there's this view of this framework in which we see soil formation, that it's called, this is an equation, but it's a bit loose. It's not about numbers itself. It's like this is like how soil, it's the interaction between weather, parent material, that are the rocks, the organisms, time, and the topography. So this is something from 1889. This was the first moment where it was this equation was coined. So then with this, they can see like how soils interact with landscapes. So then maybe where you have a steep slope, that could be a dominant factor that will shape soil. But maybe if you have some vegetation on top, it's a bit of what we call ecotones, or that it's quite known in the ecologies as well. But I mean, it's been some years from then. So then from this theory, it has been a bit refreshed. So anthropogenic activities, let's say proper design and action over these soils, have brought another agent into this equation that can be framed within these broad groups of sciences or practices. And we're very close to it. So we're in here, this equation shows how, even though this feels like some kind of like so-called a natural construct of soils, we see that we're just part of this process, right? So we evidence soil is being designed by the practice, by the knowledge, and by the visions that we have upon spaces. And in that sense, that's why it's a palimpsest. So going deeper into this conception of soil as a palimpsest, I want to, I'll have to step up a bit. Because I work with archaeology, there's this notion about how historical sciences on Earth, they sit closer to stratigraphy, and this is like a very well, like stratigraphic knowledge. It's very well documented and explained in like big history books, in like the big museums, in landscape paintings, and also theorists from the soil sciences have coined the term have coined the book-wise memory for this type of record, where like sedimentary processes are processes that go from eldest to new, from bottom to top. So whatever happens at the bottom was older than this. So in a way, there's like this metaphor that they made that they have a book-wise memory. So it's like these layers that are sequential. So you can see the past by going down and the present by going up. But within soil, it makes us linger a bit longer with territories or with spaces or with records. So even though here we can stay and document the environments that have gone one over the other, in soil, we have something very different. So this is the scale of meters, but within the 7 centimeters, we have, this is a Welsh soil. So here, for example, it's a piece of anthracite that was formed in the Carboniferous. And here we have a piece of root that it's alive today. And here we have some soil aggregates that have been formed in the last 50 years. And they all coexist. They have a history, yes. Can we trace them sequentially? Possibly if we linger with them enough. But is this question really relevant? I don't know. So this is the type of things that we try to, so it makes us question a bit longer for what it is, what does it mean to look into different moments of time recorded in a very same space that are so enmeshed together, but it's this enmeshment and this lack of clarity that we have here. It's also like a beautiful endeavor for us to see how can us as designers, us as scientists, us as practitioners in general, can start thinking what are the processes that on the surface shape this type of soils, what can we do with them, what this type of ensemble react into the policies, with the changing environment, with the type of resources that we need to make, either it's wood, if it's food, if it's just a warm or like a fresh space for us. So then, like these practices that have been happening within from the Carboniferous, maybe not from the Carboniferous, but at least this piece of coal arrived here because there was a coal mine closed. Then it lingered here, but now it's being eaten by bugs, generating the soil aggregates that are being eaten by the root. So then it's this type of associations that are the most interesting for us. So like we can engage with whatever past that could be industrial, that could be extractive, that could be not green enough for current discourses, have a meaningful impact and relationship to the type of praxis and visualizations that we develop here. So this is one of the,
It's coming.
It's coming. Oh. So this was, from this mentality, this is one of the very first explorations that we're starting. So, I mean, literally and metaphorically, to reach that type of analysis, we have to dig and we have to understand a bit of what has happened before to understand what happened here. So this was one of the first efforts to convey together. So these are like the current train lines in Wales. These are the coal mines. So we see this enmeshment in between transport and tunnels of the coal mines. So over like this, what we're seeing there from a technical view started being materialized in some forms of visualization of today. So today we can also rethink about all this infrastructure that has been abandoned and how can it help us rethink the way in which communities that maybe are right here will engage with their landscapes, which I mean, we'll talk briefly. But it matters a lot what it meant for us to peel up the land and to how this very subtle move, it's actually not subtle, but how this graphic twist and this that has some aesthetic to it, has an intentional positioning for us. And another way of doing this is like what we started calling the territorial palimpsest, which was seeing from these landscapes that were abandoned after the closing of the mines from the other map, was seeing like in one single piece of land that underwent so many transformations in time, how could we construct a palimpsest from the early 20th century, how these mines were covered with woodlands before they produced coal, then it produced timber. So you can see the tight grid here, so to produce big volumes. What were the policies back then, the mentalities behind it, the discourses, how then with this, when we were talking earlier about sustainable development, the trees were there, the discourse were new, but then little tweaks were done, and how these landscapes that were planted there are still there. They obey the aesthetics of a policy that was from the early 20th century that has nothing to do with the current needs of the of people living in these towns. And now they have been like barren. They have been clear felt everything to put this things, and then they're leaving the soil there. So when you uncover like all of like from one day to the other soil that has been under the shadows for hundreds of years, you have very severe rots. But it's only an analysis that come after seeing this historical composition that we call the territorial palimpsest. And it was, and we could see that whatever happened at that scale happened as well at this minimal scale. We can see here the industrial past, in here as well, and the woodlands that are growing on top, and they're only 7 centimeters of soil. So my colleagues developed this type of visualizations of how these landscapes look like, and not only that, we recollected some words from the people that were living here. And these are word by word what they said about this land. So sometimes we romanticize what woodlands are, what nature is, but this type of exercise of going deep makes us read and engage with this type of work. So then the question is, like, how can this understanding of soil as a palimpsestic and view, and how can this disciplinary view can give us a frame to, how can we frame the features behind, and how are these views that are not only are from the disciplinary, but also from these voices recorded into the type of visualizations that we do. So then we go into other side of history, which is not only the disciplinary, but also the aesthetic that comes with it. So in that sense, we started looking into, for example, how geological representation at this moment of time was like such a big hit, and everyone was engaging with it, because it was also a bit of the driver of the coal extractive mentalities that were from the other image. So here we see like divine detail on each one of the stratigraphical book-wise layering that we talked earlier about. Even here, over here, these fossils have so much detail that they use this the aesthetics of the sublime to engage with the viewer, and then it is easier to normalize that this is the past, and that this is nature, and that this is scientific knowledge, and this is a format that explains the world. And at the same time, I mean, it's not contemporary, but it's quite close. We see this type of visualizations of soil. So this particularly work of, all the paintings that I'm putting, they're all in Tate Britain. So I wanted to have a very well-framed place where you can look into representative visualizations of the time. So then here, the soil detailing doesn't have the same aesthetic appetite as the other has. And instead, while there were people fetishizing geology, we see here how labor, it's being how labor, it's, I mean, this painting in particular, that's what I wanted to say, was rejected from the Royal College of Art, and it was not published as soon as that this was produced. It was rejected from exhibitions. So when you see at the same time what two works of science that work with the below ground were foreground, we see that whatever type of visualization and work within these materialities were happening, it tells us a hint of where history will brought us later together, because it was a development of geology, of mining, that became so predominant after the Industrial Revolution. But at the same time, the farmers were dealing with the struggles that we're currently facing in very parallel lines. And at the same time, we question the type of aesthetics to the people who make these landscapes as well, in particularly soils. For example, in here, this haymakers, like the clothes are too white to be engaging with labor. And not only that, like they have all the same lighting, they're all engaging with the same, they're posing as if it was some, like you can see from this image how people who represented these landscapes were so detached from the actual practice. And this type of distancing between representation of landscape and the type of activities that happen. It's something that it's a type of relationship that we try to question when we were doing the drawings. So we were comparing like how this type of engagement happened, or in this plugging of the turnips, just by representing other things that happen in labor, for like a nursing woman, or people just resting for a really long day. It makes a different engagement, the type of message that we wanted to convey, but it also gave us it gave a different human layering to it, and it makes us closer, because these landscapes are not only these landscapes are also producing some form of relationship to us. So it's not us only as the viewer of this landscape, but it's also us that we rely on them. And it's this type of asymmetry that it's being built within this type of images. So, I mean, to kind of question this, we try to make some friendships, have some type of conversations with people who were living in this Welsh lands. So we had some cups of tea, and we made strategic alliances. So this is Richard Edwards. He has been managing woodlands for over 60 years, and for from the landscapes that we were looking at, we found out like this 6 centimeters of soil were growing in the middle of 14 hectares of managed land that they managed to get a lease after 6 or 7 years of talking to the council, like, let us do this, let us do this. So just by doing some practice that had to do with selective thinning and logging, it created a totally different image of managing, of engaging with the landscape. So everything when we arrived, most of the landscapes were like these overstocked woodlands or complete barren lands. So by finding this type of praxis, we started thinking like bringing up again this notion of the palimpsest and the overwriting, and how the process that we envisioned as designers were not the fixed image, but then like a sequence, or we can go either from one understocked landscape, from one overstocked into this sequence that should be around here. So it's not that we want to like have a fixed image here. Like, we understand that seasonality, climate emergency can drive us a bit closer to this point somehow, but it is the process that happens on the surface that would aim into going somewhere here. And at the same time, we understand that whatever is happening on the surface, like thinking again on this soil palimpsest and this equation of soil formation, would have an impact of the soil. So we were envisioning how to also drive from here into here, and from here into here. And we kind of mapped as well the time it could take us to do that, because it's not that easy. And it's something that it's also important for us to keep in mind when doing, when projecting, and try to not oversimplify what the carbon discourse is, because time is crucial when thinking about this. And then we were trying to see this process of design, not only looking at these landscapes that we were seeing there, but also seeing, this is the thin section that I showed earlier, but this is also, soil scientists call this the soil architecture, which is like this ensemble of pores and angles, tells you a bit of how these soils react to the interactions of water, air. So when you have this type of like angular conditions, that means that water can flow very easily without destroying what is around. So the soil can be a bit more soluble if you have a saturation of water in case of a flood, while if you have this is a bit, these colors are less dark than this. So this means that you don't have a lot of organic matter that's in non-stable forms. But anyway, so this soil architecture can tell you a bit of what would be the aim, like even in hundreds of years, of how these well soils could look like in the future to build up a process. And based on that, we started making manuals and these type of models. Sorry, on how to go from this state into this, that it's hook park. So this lighting doesn't really help. But this soil, it's this big. This soil, it's thicker, but it lacks life. And then this has bulbs and other types of diversity into it that might not be, even though these two might have the same depth, these ones are a bit more resilient to it. And we try to look also in the type of practice that we were telling you, that over 4 hectares, I said more than that. This type of practice that we're unfolding into the soil, or into the landscape, or into the thinning of these woodlands as well, would have a repercussion back and forth between what is created on the ground, what are the types of alliances, and this is like the key component of our piece of design. So rather than having a final image of what would be the landscapes that we were envisioning of, we did a manual that, alongside Richard Edward, he was the main editor of this manual. Sorry, yes. So these are the 3 farmers. He made an inventory of tools and skills that over the years of his career he wanted to share, because he said that he was like, the only thing he wanted from us was that all his knowledge would be shared, because that was the only possibility that he could see, that the success of his intention, that his intention would be successful at some point of history, that us as students, as researchers, could just make this archive and share it all over to replicate the efforts that they have been done in this landscape. And whoever had the similar conditions could just take what is useful for them, implement them, and make it work. So, I mean, beyond this type of project, this has also unfolded into other pedagogical practice and collaborative practice to amplify relevant voices. So before I jump into it, this was also another condensation of these efforts on how the work that was done on the surface had an impact on soil, and some of the activities that would take place on site, from the manual, from the conversations. So everyone that is here, this is actually a photo that you saw earlier. So all of the members that have partaken in making these landscapes are here. And then how to go from this other sequence into a managed state, also by mapping out the time that it will take to reach into this landscape, into the managed state. So you see that it's a play on the soil, but it's also, it has a type of dialogue between how even light is coming into the site, how this leaves and mulch that we were seeing yesterday in the sampling, it's coming into place to accumulate this matter that will feed all these woodlands and all the vegetation that it's around. And then this is a question that we have at Landscape Urbanism, how to communicate this knowledge. So then we went into other places in the UK. We went to Scotland. This is a footage from the students that engage with completely different soils that are peatlands. It's a shame because I don't know why is it so slow. Maybe in, I don't know how to do this.
No way to put the sound.
It's a touch screen, so if you turn the mic off on the TV and then go to the more. You wanted to play the sound here?
Yes. Matter, and so the role that they played was to rethink because so these are spaces of again we're like I'm sorry it's like I'm against trees but I'm not so they were planting a lot of you see again the same pattern of tree planting very close to each other. So these are trees that come from this big investments on green energy and regreening, and they are destroying peatlands. So they're oxidizing larger volumes of CO2 to capture less volume of CO2 to keep their industries going. So, I mean, from a scientific perspective, this is a massacre, but it's also because of how soils are so underrepresented into the discourses of the climate emergency, the carbon business. Again, they started incorporating and thinking these forms of devices, platforms for land management, assessment, where they could incorporate other technical knowledge on getting to know the peatlands and how to track them to have a proper management, because this is also included in, like, people are getting grants to manage this. So it was because it was an intention to question through this praxis on documenting and using manuals for care and monitoring and reshape what could be that. So again, we have all these visualizations of understanding soils, of visualizing the type of flavor, and going to step by step into what are, like, how can we use these instruments to engage with these landscapes. They did all this analysis on their own, so they became experts on peatlands. And same with the vegetation that it's on top, that they are in association with these soils. And then bringing it into a bigger scale, incorporating this small scale knowledge into this future scenario visualizations to have these propositions for councils and decision makers to inform what is the role of this. So some other questions that we're some other forms of engagement that we're having are in a very blurred line between praxis, pedagogies, and collaborations. So in the brief, we're trying to acknowledge and work alongside the land workers alliances and the
1 and 2. And for lesson 3, we have to.
You just muted, it's okay.
Okay. So yes, it's try to, so there's, so currently we're in the UK, we're undergoing a change in policies, and we're questioning what are the farming futures of this landscape. So the Land Workers Alliance have a say on this. And our intention is to, again, using the words that we've been using over and over again, we're trying to echo and amplify what their experience and their voices and their understanding of how the landscape should be managed into the visualizations that we're doing to actually see what public money should be used for. So we also do this type of situated praxis where students not only draw the landscape, but they actually do something with their own hands on it. So this is also a type of practice that here, like by thinning, they are creating mulch and some sort of practice with soil formation. And this also lets them have some joy with it. This is another collaboration that we're working with, which is a community soil health clinic in London. So we're a group of land workers, researchers, soil scientists, and composters dreaming together about setting up a DIY community facility, offering free and local soil testing for growers, community gardeners, and anyone with an interest in caring for the local environment. This was an event, this is one of the first meetings we had in the House of Aneta, that is famous for the type of dissident gatherings. And here, so we collectively build what it is. It's not a centralized institution. It's just people that with their free time and with an appetite for doing something, we learn together and we record and build what we feel makes sense to get a better knowledge of soil health in London. And again, this is again the part of the praxis from the other side, and some other efforts that we're doing with. So these are microscopic visualizations of soil life. So what we've seen as well is that to form healthier soils, we need to maintain the life and the microorganism that transforms chemically and physically the compounds that are enmeshed there. So our design has also a close look into the very fine grains of it. And this type of organisms are the ones who are doing the work. So in these visualizations, so this is the Hook Park soil that we saw in the physical model that had a lot of life. So, you know, every color in image segmentation that you see, it's an organism. I mean, this is a fossil, but this is how an industrial potato farm soil looks like. So you see that if we count the parts of it compared to this, we see like a great disbalance on the number and the diversity of shapes and colors in there. So we're trying to explore a bit more what this type of technologies offer to trace these bacteria and make different forms of engagement. And that's it. And of course, to maintain finally these alliances. So our friend Richard, this very first conversation on the Welsh soils happened in 2019, and the current cohort of students have been just there working again in collaboration with them and trying to keep amplifying other voices from farmers, knowledge, and yeah, like give them the microphone so we can only do the drawings of their work. And that's it. Thank you.
So, comments, questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, first of all. And also, mine's just a curiosity, like where and how deep usually you dig a place, and for maybe which reason?
For what? For soil.
Yes, exactly.
So in the so for example, if you're looking into agriculture, if you want to go very technical, the effective depth of plants for agricultural production is 25 to 30 centimeters. So if you want to look at that, then you need that. There are soils that I think the deepest soil it's tricky because so for example, this is a soil, this is from a volcanic eruption context. So this is 2 meters and there's still more soil below. This is also like, I think it's 3 meters, but it's from archaeology and it's because of lacustrine. We have different, like each one of these moments are soil formation. But overall, like these are anomalies. You don't have to go that deep. This would be the case, the deepest case scenario. But in a traditional soil within 2 meters, you will find, I mean, they're like horizons that are these boundaries with it. So you usually have A, B, C, and then the parent material, which is the rock. So there are like very subtle gradations between where soil ends and where geology or the sedimentary record begins. But it depends a lot on, first, for example, yesterday, we couldn't go deeper than 10 centimeters. So with 10 centimeters, you can also do something. In the Welsh soil, we went 7 centimeters and then the soil ended there. So I think something in between 5 centimeters to 3 meters, but it depends on what you're allowed to do, what is the type of question you have. Yeah, and something around there.
Elena, there's a question in the chat here. Molly's saying, really interesting presentation, thank you. Curious about soil testing. If this is possible for local community organizations to access, to monitor their own, for example, should a stewardship body, or is this a service to offer?
So there's the so there are different projects here. So part of them are the theses, part of them are the community health. So with them, we're trying to gather. So we bought some equipment with external financing, but we're not yet in the moment where we can produce them like in bulk. So we accept requests right now for testing, but we have a long line for doing them. And also some of the members in the team are training themselves to develop this testing. Because, for example, in London, a big issue that we're having is that they're heavy metal polluting. So some of the practices that we would want to have have to be rethought because we need to have this test developed earlier, but at the same time, we're scared that these results will get us far from soil. So we might need to, it's a big question that we're having right now, and that we're trying to have and share together. So we're in the process of trying to have pilots that if they want to, they can reach us to the Compost Mentis. We will launch a website soon, but we're in that stage where we're accepting pilots. It's not yet, we're not yet to develop big numbers of results. Let's just reach out and we'll let you know.
Great. Okay. Great. There's lots of compliments in the chat as well. Amazing presentation. Thank you. So extensive. Lots of little claps and hearts. Wow, it was so fascinating. They're like little love hearts. Any other questions?
Super clear.
Thank you for a very nice presentation. And if I understand, some of the outcome of this research that you're doing is this handbooks. Is that correct? Is that something that you bring back to the community, or is that something that could be applicable to other contexts? And how is that distributed?
Elena mentioned that one of the main efforts, at least in the program, is to work with existing projects. No? So that basically means that if you work with existing projects, there's an existing community developing that and perhaps needing the services of producing manuals and basically visualizing and producing the knowledge that they already have in another medium that might be easier to transmit. So at least from that perspective, the way to be transmitted is already within the communication of the community. Not all the projects, obviously, that are done in the program can have this. I mean, the example that Elena mentioned has been a long collaboration that they actually start as students, no? And was sort of the pilot project that is leading us to where we are. I think, yes, some of the information that these manuals contain can be used somewhere else, no? I guess, no, but it's always a contextual situation. It's always what are the needs, what is the project at stake, and how that knowledge can be applicable. In general, I think we're trying to get away with this idea that, well, we produce something that is unique and innovative, and then we'll solve the issues for communities, rather than, well, what they're already doing and what can we then produce with what we know how to do. No, in a lot of cases it's visualization, but there's also now from other disciplines like what Elena is bringing, how to read the soil, or what the soil readings and understandings of, it's healthy, can help those communities to actually produce ways to monitoring that soil, ways to then link back to the uses that they are actually proposing to happen in that, or to transform the ways lands are being used. So that's, I think, kind of the aims and ways in which this can be transmitted.
This one is online already, and I think something that I find it very interesting is that from a pedagogical perspective, like also the students acquire the knowledge to first get to know how to use these tools inside, and then doing the drawings, and then having the skill set and the tools to also implement this in their own practice. And I think it's also very valuable in the long run, and coming from the LU master program.
I was fortunate enough to have a class in soil science when I was an undergraduate. It was one of the requirements on the landscape program that I was on in the US, and I dreaded it. I was like, oh no, I have to do sciencey stuff, like I was, artsy, creative. And I loved it. It was such an amazing class. And it wasn't just about learning soils. It was actually acquiring this new superpower of being able to read the landscape in a really rich way through the soil. So I love that your work presents that to an audience that like now they're aware that this superpower is out there, that they can read a place like a book through a soil excavation. But my question is actually about the practices of labor and care and maintenance, which you're reading from that very narrow band of the top layer of the soil. And I just wonder, because development practices tend to start with an erasure, right? They erase landscapes so you forget what was there, and then something new comes in, and you lose the ability to mourn or to understand or anything like that. How much can you really put back together of labor and maintenance practices? How much can you read, like how people cared for a place from that top layer of soil? Can you be very specific in some cases?
I can. Yes. So we will go very specific. So for example, in here we have so there's this big issue with working with soil right now that is a bit disturbing to me. That so industrial farming, what they do is that the machinery they use, they just go deep, and they destroy everything, and they remove and they mixed everything together. So when that happened, that creates a particular geometry to what happens here. So when they do that, they have a lot of scattered pieces around, but they don't have these geometries that have some rounded shapes into it. So for example, this little blurb here tells us that there's a root alive because it's red, it's not black. And then because it's in contact with this, that means that there's something, I mean, there's a plant that it's rather big. It's not a piece of grass that grew weeks ago. This could be years, because you can see 2 rings, so at least 2 years there. And then because it's so close to it, we know that it's eating this and this round shape. So when you have industrial farm, you cannot have this geometry. It's all scattered as it is here. So that's a type of geometry. That's one thing. And then because all this matrix, it's black, it means that this soil, if it's mixed, it's just within the same horizon. So there's no mixture in between this horizon and the bottom one. When industrial farming happens, it goes as deep as the other horizon. So you would see something that it's this dark with this dark colors mixed with this one, and then this you will have it a bit chopped, mixed with this. So that's how I trace care in this particular soil. And I see labor here as well, because coal pieces, if we saw this like stratigraphically, they don't belong here. They belong to meters below this. They belong to the mine shafts that are below. So it was labor who brought these little traces of coal into the surface, and it was labor who put them here. And then the proper woodland management allow these particles of anthracite and shale to be eaten very gradually, almost indistinguishable, by the bacteria of the last decades. But yeah, it's case specific. Like I had to linger with this guy a couple of hours, but it's I think it's very architectural. Like this form of thinking. It's like I don't know. Like if you see this tunnels, and I mean this things, it's also seeing the tracing of a map, or it's like looking at there's a scalar difference within it, but there's also connectedness into the form of events that are happening on its surface. So that's why I think it's so relevant to talk about this here.
Please. Thank you so much. Especially the picture on the left-hand side, you explain soil, they say somewhat folkloric or mythical way. Just like we interpret labor, like social history into it. Whereas the right-hand side is somewhat plain, as we would expect it from industrial soils. And now I wonder, there's a sort of discourse in land justice movements that we have to remystify soil and land networks, like soil and land studies, especially universities. Do you address these topics with your students coming from the sociological aspects at first, or do you enter by the planning side and then go into other aspects? Like, how do you communicate these forms of extra value?
So I think one of the first, so I made this post when looking into the historical visualizations of landscape, because only when soil is read alongside the industrialization of agriculture, you can see how seeing this material under a certain framework can unfold into the implications that happened before. So it's a question that I don't think it's completely resolved, because what we see, we have a seminar of histories and theories when we frame, we work with the concept of landscape as the lens and the frame in which your expertise and your knowledge allow you to visualize and kind of pour all the mentalities and the constructions that you have over that into the type of drawing that you're doing. So that does, like, by acknowledging that, that doesn't mean that that some assumptions will come through the type of drawing. But at the same time, the title we mentioned this praxis of interconnectedness and labor, because these soils we chose these soils because they have something to say about the praxis that are happening on the surface, and not the other way around. It's not that we just fetishize soils because they're super cool, but it's also because these specific soils are telling us something about Welsh labor and how this landscape have been mistreated, and the people who has worked they had in these tunnels, they have been slaves, and there have been a lot of very unfair practice that persists under different contexts and conditions tomorrow. But then it's an active process of recognizing and going back and forth from the studio work as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's explained it. And it's a difficult question, and I would say something that we like to think. We want to make students aware, of this kind of interconnectedness of history, politics, and the way in which landscapes are being built. And it's obviously not something easy, and that's perhaps at the beginning when I start saying, well, we are very interested in how policies shape those landscapes, but also how those landscapes are being shaped, and there's that conversation that really involves a number of different perspectives and disciplines, and we're trying to work that out. So we cannot say that we are able to perhaps to transmit that with the greatest of the success with the students. There's a lot of backgrounds, perhaps a number of knowledges that we should also incorporate, but there are some limits to which the programs, programs like this, face, But I think in general, that's the sort of endeavor, to link all these aspects into design practices, So they are not isolated, or they understand, where the forces that are shaping those things coming from.
Online, Molly is just saying, following up from her previous question, she thinks the SAYS court could be a very interesting place to try out what you're describing, but also as a place for sharing and teaching such a practice. And I'm sure Rue would agree. And Haifet's put in a comment, more than a question. I'm going to read out, it's a long one, so excuse me. Interesting to see the way you map these different processes at multiple scales and the production of toolboxes are very practical and inspirational. It was also interesting to see how the reading and critique of the anthropogenic influence is substantiated through your analysis. I'm wondering if and how you represented the transformation of social practices on the ground and their impacts. I think you've touched on that a little bit, but I don't know whether you want to add any more.
Can you repeat
The last bit.
Yeah.
How did you represent the transformation of social practices on the ground and their impacts?
So I guess I got to grab. Sorry about the question.
Yeah, I mean, the ways in which we use cartography a lot, no? So there's, that's a way to represent that. So, for example, there's the examples that Elena brought, no? Like this transformation of the Welsh landscape over time that describes, from coal mining to basically the covering of those coal mines with forests that were used to basically produce wood for the war efforts, no, in the First and Second War, and how basically transform the factory. So that's something that can be done with cartographic tools, no, basically collecting information, data. There's also a lot of work that we do, which is section work, no, which shows some of that, and it's a combination of not only section but visualization. Maybe looking more like render light, no? But we don't obviously see that as a representation, as Elena mentioned, no? As a final product. No, it's more like, on the one hand, it can be an image that describes perhaps a set of instructions of projects that already exist, no, things that may be implemented as policies, no, so they might be in itself the representation of a set of things that a community has agreed on to develop on certain landscapes, so they can become part of instructions, part of manuals, but also representation of what are the sort of regulations that people need to follow on them. No, so I guess that's basically the things. No, well, the manuals as well. No, a collection of knowledge is visually describing what they are, what they do, how they can be used in this context, etc. So those things are. It's a range of things that we use, no, to visually represent those transformations, those social formations on.
Right. Thank you so much. One last request from our friends online. Can you put a link to the handbook you described into the chat? So there is it was online. So we've asked if you could. I will. I'd like to thank you. Everyone maybe join us in thanking Elena and Alfredo for their and I don't know, should I just do a little summing up and thank you? So everybody's very sleepy very close to me. I don't know whether everyone at the back is fully caffeinated or also exhausted from our 2 days. Thank you. I think maybe first of all, just thanks everybody who's participated. Thank you everyone online who's persevered with us, and I hope that the experience has been as enriching as we found it in here. Thank you everybody also who's come in person, traveled far, and yeah, we look forward to kind of building on these conversations and relationships. I'm also aware that for those of you who are running studios on Safe Course, Convoys and Wharf, and have committed your energies, collective energies to the workshop, it may be useful to invite some of the steering group, as we may be useful to create some reviews and that type of thing. Feel free to reach out to myself, and I'm sure Tim, Christina, Elena, Alfredo, others will be happy to support what it is you're doing. And thank you from me to everybody, to the steering group, to all of you guys. It's been a great few days. I hope that you get home safely, or you press the off button safely, and you have very positive reflections on the last 2 days of the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.